Good morning, everybody. My name is Jamie Smyth, and I'm the energy editor of the Financial Times newspaper. It's my great pleasure to moderate this session with François Poirier, President and Chief Executive of TC Energy. TC Energy is the only natural gas pipeline company with assets in the United States, Canada, and Mexico. It moves roughly 30% of the gas consumed in North America through its vast network. Under François' leadership, the company is investing heavily in the United States to meet the surging demand caused by the artificial intelligence revolution and the booming trade in LNG. TC Energy is a continental energy leader at a time when geopolitics is reshaping energy markets and cross-border trade. President Trump's tariff policies are testing relationships with America's closest neighbors, including Canada, the country of François' birth. So there's no better person to talk us through the theme today, a connected continent, unleashing North American energy. Thanks for joining us, François.
Pleasure to be here.
Maybe if we start with the current situation in the US. So President Trump has gone as far as declaring a national energy emergency in the United States, even using it to order coal and gas power plants to be kept open. How do you see the situation in North America?
Well, I've been in the energy infrastructure business, Jamie, for 35 years, and I don't recall ever seeing a long-term electricity demand growth forecast as robust as we have now for the next 20 or 25 years. And even before the emergence of data centers generating all this demand for energy, we had many of the independent system operators in the U.S. Highlighting the fact that there was a critical need for investment in the transmission grid to sustain the stability and the reliability of the systems. And so when you add to that the emergence of accelerated energy demand, which is driving demand for natural gas as well, it is actually a critical situation. And in effect, I think what we need to ask ourselves is, can the energy grid of yesterday and today meet the energy needs of tomorrow? And I think there's quite a bit of investment that's required. It needs to be done in a very timely manner. And so, in my opinion, we are really in an energy emergency in the US and in North America.
Is gas the answer to that energy emergency? Because we've heard that there are delays in turbines. It's going to be difficult to build these power plants quickly. But what role for gas?
Well, I think when you look at what's typically referred to as the 5 nines of reliability of a data center, for example, that means that a data center can only be down 5 minutes and 15 seconds in a year. Renewable energy is intermittent by its nature because it's weather dependent, and so the ability to add capacity to power generation from nuclear will take, it's at least 10 years to develop and build a nuclear plant. So the timelines for natural gas power generation they're still long, 3 to 5 years, with supply chain constraints and permitting, et cetera, but they are shorter than any other form of energy. So the actual fact is we need an all-of-the-above strategy. Every form of electricity generation should be pursued to expand capacity of the grid, not only for meeting data center demand, but meeting LNG export growth, which of course contributes to global energy security.
Let's talk a little bit about LNG then. I mean, Canada, US, Mexico, what role do they have? Can they supply the world's LNG needs?
Very much so. It's amazing what's happened in the United States over the last 15 years. From virtually, a standing start 15 years ago, the United States has become the largest exporter of LNG in the world. We forecast growth in LNG exports over the next 10 years to triple, from 13 BCF a day to 38 BCF a day. Amazing entrepreneurship and ingenuity and commercial acumen from the U.S. energy sector, which is not at all surprising. And now Canada is beginning to play a role there as well, with the commissioning of the very first LNG export facility occurring in the next weeks in northern British Columbia, and we see Mexico also developing its own LNG export infrastructure as well. So I think North America will play a growing role in meeting the world's energy requirements, particularly with a desire to reduce reliance on Russian energy for the free and democratic world.
Yeah, I actually went on a tour of LNG Canada 3 weeks ago, and it was fantastic. It's the first LNG facility that Canada's going to build, but there are others planned. What do you make of Mark Carney's idea of turning Canada into an energy superpower? Is that possible? And could it compete with the US?
So it is very much possible. I would say that for the first time in more than a decade, we have a government in Canada that is supportive of and understands the importance of developing energy infrastructure. It is Canada's form of hard power on the global stage is its natural resources. And frankly, it's been underinvested and underdeveloped for quite a long time. When you also factor in some of the trade tensions between Canada and the US, it's important for Canada to diversify its customer base. Right now, 99% of natural gas that's exported from Canada is exported to the US. And while I believe there is even more that Canada can do to help the US achieve its energy dominance, there's also an opportunity for Canada to diversify its end-use markets. So as in the US, there's lots of work that needs to be done around policy reform, around regulatory reform, judiciary reform as well. But the business need in there and the policy support is there for the first time in a while.
Is there enough demand globally to accept Canadian LNG? I mean, and the Gulf of Mexico, we're really ramping up there, and other countries are jumping on board. You think there's enough demand?
Very much so. I do see Asia as the natural market for Canadian LNG. All of the LNG exports in Canada will come from the west coast of British Columbia. It has a 10-day shorter delivery time to Asian markets than the US Gulf Coast has. That's a big transportation cost advantage. Also, the Western Canadian Basin, natural gas pricing for the underlying commodity is far lower, which makes it more competitive. So definitely there's an opportunity for Canada to compete with the US and others to supply Asian markets. But I believe demand in Asia will be met by both growth in US LNG exports as well as Canada's.
Your pipelines, as I mentioned in the intro, are all across the continent. So that's a lot of infrastructure. But is there more to this interconnected energy system than just cross-border infrastructure? What other factors are important, do you think?
Well, what's interesting is more energy crosses back and forth across the US-Canada border than any other border in the world. And it's because energy flows ignore borders. Western Canadian natural gas supplies the Pacific Northwest of the U.S. The Pacific Northwest is almost totally reliant on Canadian natural gas to meet its requirements. By the same token, Appalachian gas in the U.S. is meeting a significant amount of demand in central and eastern Canada. We have heavy oil from Western Canada supplying the Midwest and U.S. Gulf Coast refineries. Those refineries are configured for heavies, not the light oil that is produced by America. We have electricity flowing across those borders, and Canadian uranium supplies most of the 92 nuclear plants in the United States. So there is, and then I would say also that each country supports the reliability of the other to the extent there's a supply interruption because of weather or otherwise. So it's quite a symbiotic relationship, and in my view, the cross-border nature of energy flows actually helps both countries be more prosperous than they would be separately.
Okay, so now we've had the tariffs. We've had a tariff scare for energy. I'm not so sure. I don't think the tariffs are applying if you're part of this free trade agreement. But is there a risk that this is going to destroy the relationship? What are companies feeling about this at the minute?
Well, right now, under the USMCA agreement, there is an exemption for energy flowing across the borders to the extent Canada can demonstrate what's called the rules of origin, as long as the energy is produced in Canada and Canada's just not a through market for production from other countries. So that's worked relatively well. I don't believe that this will damage the relationship. I believe that the relationship will actually get stronger. Interestingly, with our assets being in all three countries, we've had a change in government in all three countries in the last 12 months. And I would say for the first time in quite a long time, there's a policy alignment in all three countries around the importance of energy might, along with economic might and military might, in contributing to energy security for each of the three countries. So that policy alignment is there. Canada, the US, and Mexico approach how to get it done very differently because of some of the cultural and regional differences in each of the three countries. But all three countries understand the role energy dominance plays in global security.
And actually, you mentioned in the green room, maybe you shouldn't have, that you attended the G7 recently. Is there anything you could tell us about the mood among the G7 leaders and the business community that often attends these types of meetings?
So, it's very clear that tensions in the Middle East are overshadowing, some of the original agenda, and I'm not privy to any of those types of conversations. But I will say there is a recognition, and I've had the opportunity to meet with President Sheinbaum, with foreign affairs ministers from a few countries, and there is a recognition that there needs to be more collaboration between government and the private sector to understand how to attract more capital to invest in infrastructure. And again, I think it stems from that alignment across all three countries in North America that energy might leads to AI might and AI dominance and all of the other all the other global security benefits that come with that. So it's a challenging time geopolitically in the world, which to me has underscored the valuable role that energy can play, having affordable, reliable energy across the free and democratic world, how important that is to global geopolitics.
Maybe bringing it back to the United States, President Trump wants to unleash American dominance around the world. What are you seeing on the ground? Is that possible? What needs to happen to make that possible?
So first thing we need is faster timelines for permitting and more certainty around the outcomes. Uncertainty is the enemy of investment. I'll give you an example. We just got a permit for a pipeline in Virginia. Very simple project. We're taking an old pipeline out of the ditch with a smaller diameter and replacing it with a larger diameter pipeline so that we can move more gas through it on our existing right-of-way. We were very proud to receive our permit 6 months early, but it took 29 months. It should not take 29 months to get a permit to replace a pipeline in an existing right-of-way. So we need more clarity and a greater sense of urgency around getting our permits early, particularly when you're upgrading infrastructure on existing rights-of-way. We also need legislation to clarify various agencies' obligations because there's a lot of litigation that happens when there's vague language in various statutes that opponents of the energy industry like to take advantage of. So litigation has been a big source of slowing down infrastructure development in addition to permitting. And I think this administration and the president is extremely strategic. He understands the role energy plays, turning megawatt hours into intelligence. He understands helping supply the free and democratic world with the energy it needs. And I believe the impetus is there and the motivation is there to improve this. And in fact, they've looked to industry to help them understand what our needs are.
Francois, I have lots of other questions which I haven't been able to get to in our allotted time, unfortunately. Maybe just one last one very quickly and a few words answer. Mark Carney, is he very different to Trudeau for the energy sector in Canada?
Yes, he has a sense of urgency. His focus on developing infrastructure is legitimate. He knows Canada has ignored the Arctic, has ignored its own energy security for too long, and he's very focused on seeing it happen. And I think he and President Trump will get along very well.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate it.